From the innovators of Delay of Game and 2 for 2 comes a new sports talk forum, but with the same mentality, to bring you the top sports headlines in a simple way.
With Ryan Swanigan.
Turn the camera around, bend down, get next to a stuffed puppet of a raccoon and take a selfie there.
And the cows come sailing in.
That's exactly the point I'm trying to make.
Not so fast, my friend.
And Brent Bonfleur.
I have nothing against women being in sororities.
One and done, girl. That's the title of my autobiography.
Yeah, the head comb. Imagine me in a little kitty suit.
You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast.
Hey, welcome in to another edition of The Route here, and once again this week, I am here and Brent is not. I'll just bring that to you immediately here, but welcome into the show, another fun, shorter show today, mainly because we have, I said earlier at the beginning of this time, bringing you podcasts and whatnot, that we were not married to our format that we came out with and that we created and structured for this show, that we would break away from it sometimes and do other things to, I guess, spice things up a little bit or bring a fresh, different approach on sports here. So that's what we have in store for you today. And joining me is the man who always was reliable in times of crisis and just knows what the heck he's talking about. And his name is Jon Kipper. He's back for his second appearance on The Route. He's a popular guy, but that's because he's so damn good at what he does.
Good to be here, Ryan.
How you doing,
awesome.
Kipper?
How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. It's just like the old days once again.
Ryan, you should feel honored the Packers are playing right now, and I'm in here with you.
Yes. That's
I'm going to be closely monitoring it, so if I ever space out for a second, that's what I'm looking at.
Oh, yes. High form of flattery from Jon Kipper. But enough of the niceness. It's time to rant about Husker football. Where is it? Come on.
Yes, it's time for the original Ryan's rant, but Ryan goes off on something that's more fake than fake or completely improbable. This used to air on his old show, but now he's gone from that show, so he's here on the route. And so, Ryan's rant can continue to harvest life's absurd issues that have simple solutions if logic is applied. In short, we just call this segment Ryan's Rant.
So we're doing what we did last week, and we're combining this show with our Husker football podcast. Devin Cleach unavailable today as well. So looking forward to hearing his comments. But I guess we'll just have to try for next week. And this week, kind of like last week, again, for the third time this season, Nebraska blows another game on the last drive by the opposing team. Now, Kipper, you and I went through so much from the beginning from year one of Nebraska being in the Big Ten, and there weren't these many heartbreaks over the course of Bo Pelini's tenure during Nebraska's time in the Big Ten as there was this season, right? I mean, you only had one game a season where there was so much heartbreak like this, and I would think it'd be two of them last year with Michigan State and Minnesota. Prior to that, I can't think of anything in which any time Nebraska had taken the lead and on the last drive they gave it up. I can't think of any other time other than those two games last year in which this happened for Nebraska, and now it's happened 3 times in one season.
I would say I'm thinking of heartbreaking games with Bo. I mean, obviously Texas comes to mind. Iowa State at home, the game where Nebraska fumbled 7 times.
Yeah, but I mean, in these fashions where on the last drive, BYU scores, Illinois scores.
I mean, Nebraska won
Wisconsin.
A lot of those games when they were close. I mean, I think back to Northwestern's and Michigan State's of Bo's tenure, where Nebraska came back and won. Mm-hmm. Now we're seeing the other side of it.
Yeah. And like I said, I can't think of any other times where this happened at any point during Bo Pelini's era. It was more of, as you said, the game against Texas where Nebraska just couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. Same against Iowa State. Same against Michigan State last year where they came back and Minnesota came back, but Nebraska had a chance and they couldn't do it on their final drive. But those don't add up to this year.
It's been a heartbreaking year, man.
It's just
it's like each one after each one, it's kind of like you're more dull to it. Because obviously BYU, that's arguably the most heartbreaking game Nebraska's ever had in my life.
Same here.
But yeah, Nebraska was Miami, and then last week, whatever happened in that Illinois game, and now I guess Wisconsin. Yeah, we're not used to this as a fan base, and I want to preach patience. I want to, but you got to be frustrated too. This was a team that was pretty good under Bo still. You have 9 wins. Obviously, they had their faults, but this is not a team that should be 2-4 right now. And obviously, you can go back to Nebraska could absolutely be 6-0. They're not. I don't know if you want to look at football that way because that's kind of why. You play the games. You got to be able to finish. But yeah, I'm kind of at a loss for answers, and I keep going back to on two different sides of the spectrum. One, give Riley time. He's new. He has new players and all that. I totally get that. And I saw just recently a Facebook post from Tommy Rizach, who's in the broadcasting school here, kind of just outlined all the great college coaches and their first year at these schools and stuff. But the difference is Nebraska has 9 wins last year. Nebraska is a team that will have talent every year as long as you do things right. And they had talent going into this season.
A great talent this year.
And Riley has struggled. So, some of it's adjustments. He has to get used to these players. He has to get his own players into an extent. But you can still do pretty well. And so I keep going that, and I keep going like this is unacceptable. Nebraska has to be better than this.
Because this is what Husker fans wanted. They wanted a new coach. They wanted to be better.
And I did. I'm guilty of it.
9-4.
And my thing with that was, at some point, and you've heard me say this a million times, at some point you have to realize what your standards of your program are, and you got to take your risk. And so I was completely fine with Nebraska firing Bo, and I'm still in that favor. I'm still happy Nebraska did it. You took the risk under Riley, and we were here when Riley got hired. We rushed over to KRNU and did a little show that day. And steadily upon months and months, we talked ourselves into the hire. When we first heard it, it was kind of head scratching.
Yeah, exactly.
But the more we heard, the more we liked. But there was evidence at the very least that he takes time to build stuff, and he is not prone. I should reword that. He is prone to sometimes having bad years in the name of rebuilding. Because we've seen an offense that is not an offense designed for Tommy Armstrong, and there's a gigantic stubbornness to change. They still are passing much more than they should be, and it's just they're not listening. They're not like, and from what Langsdorff said this week in his comments to the media, it's like he doesn't even regret it. It's like he just is going to keep doing this. They got to realize Sean Mannion is not playing quarterback for Nebraska. Eli Manning's not playing quarterback for Nebraska. This is a running quarterback. This is a running team. This is a team that prides itself on running the football.
Exactly.
And it sounds simple just to say we need to run more. And I hate armchair offensive coordinators. It does bother me because it's an incredibly tough job, and you have hindsight and all that. And so I typically get annoyed with fans when they complain about the play calling, unless it's just egregious. And I don't know if the play calling has been egregious, but it hasn't been good.
No.
And I think you can easily step up and say something has to change here.
Yeah. And believe it or not, once again, we are Nebraska fans, and the media in Nebraska is talking about an offensive coordinator that needs to change his methods. It's just a common thing that just keeps on happening, from Sean Watson to Tim Beck, now Danny Langsdorff.
I'm pretty confident at times people complained about Tom Osborne's play calling. So, you're always going to have people complaining about the play calling.
Exactly.
It's just an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But I don't.
It's almost like, and I hate to say this, but some of the things that are happening now are starting to resemble a little bit here and there what happened during the Callahan years when there was a change from, no, we're not going to do this running the football stuff. We're going to do more passing. We'll mix in the run, but we're not going to have our quarterback scrambling around like Jamal Lord before, whoever was quarterback for Nebraska in the Callahan years.
It was Zach Taylor.
Yeah, Zach Taylor.
Gaines for a bit.
Like
Keller.
those guys are gonna. Sam Keller's gonna throw the football. He's gonna throw the football more, and Nebraska fell on its face. Eventually, they fell on their face.
I don't know if quarterback play is the reason Nebraska fell apart during Callahan. I mean, 04 was bad. That was a situation kind of like this year where they had a dual threat quarterback in Joe Daly that was in an offense that was completely and utterly built for somebody else, and it just seems like they're just waiting for their pocket passer. And Riley talked about, well, I'm going to adjust to the offense to our strengths. It hasn't really been done to an extent. I'm sure they're running the ball more than they did at Oregon State. But it's just frustrating because it's still not good. And I will say this, too. We've talked about the offense a lot. Defense mainly held its own yesterday. But
there's only so much that defense could do yesterday.
I understand they're depleted.
Everything out there on the field.
I understand that, and they played hard. But that Wisconsin offense is not good.
No, it's
Stave's not good.
They have no running game. That's what I kept saying.
And I don't even know if we should have given up 23 points to them. I mean, people keep blaming the offense, and that's probably who we're going to blame and who should be blamed. But that was not a good offense.
Gave up 322 passing yards.
They scored 6 points against Iowa, Ryan.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, like every game's different to an extent, but that game was in Wisconsin. And this is in Lincoln.
And we know how ruckus and crazy Madison is.
The crowd was good yesterday. I mean, at least one thing with Riley, he's not going to be complaining about the crowd.
Yeah, it was amazing.
I know. And
it's
it's not just an offensive issue. And to some extent, I mean, if we do the season again, we might be 5-1. I don't know. But we're not going to be. And it's a rough year. But it's a weird year. Like 2-4 usually resembles a team that's just terrible. Nebraska's been in every game. That's why this is just weird. Nebraska could beat Michigan State for all we know. Like, it hasn't been so much of like, at least with Bo, we would get killed in our losses a lot of times.
Yeah,
these are all close losses. And even the Miami game, we came back at least.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think that's what's ever the more frustrating. It's one thing when you just don't have the talent and you're just getting beat up. It's another thing to give up Hail Marys to BYU, to give up a big Hail Mary late in the game to Illinois that led to a touchdown. It's another thing for Wisconsin just to drive down and beat you in the last minute.
Just can't close the door.
No.
That's unacceptable. You have to close the door. And that also goes back to the offensive side in clock management. This team has left too much time on the clock for a response by the opponent. BYU, Illinois, Southern Miss almost came back had it not been for a sack by Freedom Akamolandun. You cannot do this. You absolutely have to run the ball and run out that clock. That's how you do it. You don't do this passing stuff. There is no passing when it comes to running out the clock. You run the football. If it's 3rd and 7, you run the football. Maybe you pass because you pick up a first down, then you really seal the deal.
Yeah, the clock management's bad.
You have to run it out. It's that simple. NFL, college football, high school football, you run out the clock. And this team can't do that.
I know.
And when it comes to those scenarios, Nebraska's 1-3. Their only win against Southern Miss, and Southern Miss could have won that game. They could have won that game, which is absolutely shocking to think about because it's Southern Miss. It's Southern Miss. It's not Michigan State. It's not Utah. It's not Ole Miss. It's Southern Miss. And they almost won. Bo Pelini probably would have had that team beat to the ground.
You'd think so. I mean, there were the McNeese States and the South Dakota State games.
True.
So, I mean, it wasn't
but in
always
McNeese
that case,
State, at least Nebraska didn't leave more than 20 seconds for the Cowboys to go down there and try and score. Mm-hmm. But the point being, you have to manage this game properly, and we haven't seen that.
No.
The only time we did was against South Alabama.
Well, obviously that's going to be managed fine. Yeah, I know. And I mean, you can look at all the Nebraska's losses except Miami and blame clock management to an extent. And I mean it just seems like something so easy. Mm-hmm. It's something that fans can't make play calls and set up offensive plays. You can't do that. You're not smart enough. But fans do know clocks.
Yeah.
Fans know how football works when clocks run and when they stop and all that. And it seems like an incredibly easy thing to do. But it just goes back to the whole thing, the stubbornness of Riley and Langsworth right now, is they just continue to think they need a pass all the time. And they don't.
And Tommy Armstrong is not built for that.
No.
He's built to do both, and he can do both really well.
When you gear your offense towards passing.
Yeah. You can't do that all the time. Instinct for Tommy Armstrong is to run the football. And he ran for 50 yards yesterday on 8 carries, and I don't even know if half of those were designed.
I know.
That's the thing. Nebraska's leading rusher was Andy Janovich and Terrell Newby, and Andy Janovich ran the ball 3 times. One of them was a 55-yard touchdown.
I know.
Just because it was a little fullback, Wisconsin couldn't tackle. He broke a tackle. He stiff-armed the guy, and he was gone.
It's almost just like, I mean, I know this isn't not realistic.
That's great for Andy Janovich, by the way.
They should just try this for one game and just run the ball 80% of the time and see what happens.
Yeah.
Just shut us up. If they do that and Nebraska scores 13 points, okay, pass more. But maybe you should just try something else, because this whatever is going on right now clearly isn't working.
Tommy Armstrong, 11 for 28. 129 yards passing after he put up over 300, against Miami in an overtime loss? The last 2 games for Armstrong have just been terrible. The bad version of Tommy Armstrong. But the thing is, and this now brings us into the defensive part, Joel Stave was 24 of 50. He threw the ball 50 times and completed only 24 of those passes. Mm-hmm. That's less than 50%. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you'd think that the secondary would be able to maybe do something. Because there's so much pressure being put on Joel Stave or any quarterback by the front 7.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that you can't bail out the front 7? You can't help them out. I shouldn't say bail them out. You can't help them out? I mean, what are we doing?
With the secondary, I think some of that is Bo's fault in terms of not getting great recruits. Obviously, Gary's good.
True.
But
Josh Kalu is good, too.
Yeah.
But he
has his moments, though.
Exactly, yeah. And we saw that yesterday.
Yeah. And just the utter lack for being able to cover deep balls is frustrating. Because that seems like the easiest thing to do as a cornerback. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's tough to cover slants and out routes, but I mean, as long as you have speed, theoretically, you should be able to cover deep balls pretty well. And it wasn't a huge problem yesterday, but just in general.
Yeah.
I know, man. I want to say it's going to get better. I want to think Nebraska's going to beat Minnesota, but we have no idea. We don't know anyway. I'm out of answers. We've just kind of been ranting because we don't really know what the hell is going on.
Exactly. You can't. Nobody can figure it out. It all doesn't make sense, especially for me yesterday, because we just said a little bit ago, Wisconsin is not that good. They lost Corey Clement. Now they're really not that good. I mean, now I kept saying that at the beginning of this year, Wisconsin. Everybody keeps saying, "Oh, they're the favorite to win the West. They're going to do it with what?" Their offensive line is gone. I don't know what the heck's left on defense. Their quarterback is iffy every other week. They have no Melvin Gordon. Their receivers are depleted. There's almost nothing there. And that's why they're somehow miraculously they're sitting at 4-2. They should be at 500 at 3-3. And meanwhile on Nebraska's side, there's more talent for Nebraska than there is for Wisconsin. And yet, they just can't figure it out for whatever reason in the secondary, in the penalties department for sure. That's another issue that just keeps hurting Nebraska. 9 penalties, once again, high-end amount. It's just, you can't figure it out. You can't figure it out with the talent that this team has, with this pretty darn good coaching staff that Mike Riley put together. It's not working. I don't know what it is.
Let me ask you
I don't know. Yeah.
Nebraska loses out. What happens?
Oh, my goodness. I
don't think it's going to happen. Nebraska's been close enough. I think they're going to start winning some of these. Purdue and Rutgers are still on the schedule.
Man, I have no idea what happens because, that's the thing. If you're saying Nebraska loses out, you're saying Nebraska loses to 2 dumpster fires in Purdue and Rutgers especially. You lose to Rutgers in Piscataway? Oh, my gosh.
I don't think that's going to happen.
That almost happened to Michigan State on Saturday night, too.
But I don't think Crowley gets fired. I think you'll at least give him one more year, but you would have to think a lot of that coaching staff's gone.
I really don't know what happens. I'm really afraid to think about what happens if Nebraska loses out and those games include Rutgers and Purdue on the road. Oh my, that's a terrible thing to think about because that literally isn't just it's not heartbreak, it's just a full-on, you get blown up because you're in shock. Because everybody kept saying, beginning of the season, 6-6, 7-5, 5-7, and I was like, it's not possible. I can't see it. And I can't find, I dare anybody who's listening to this podcast to come forward and say, oh, I had it going this way. You did? You had Nebraska losing in a Hail Mary to BYU. You had Illinois coming back in the last drive. You had Wisconsin coming back in the last drive. Heck, Minnesota might come back in the last drive. You're telling me you saw this happening? Nebraska not able to close out the last drive of 3 of their 4 games?
I tell you what, I'm all that more thankful that I like the Packers in the NFL.
Oh, tell me about it.
I can, at least on Sundays, I can.
Like, literally right
rest
now,
in that.
I am praying that the Cubs win the World Series because that means I'll be able to get through the month of October. And then I guess once November comes around, I'll start watching Nebraska men's basketball. Hope that's good. I love college basketball in general, so I guess that will help things out a little bit. But, man, if the Cubs are done after the DS, I don't know what I'm going to do for like 3 or 4 for a month's time because it will be just it'll be very difficult to watch Nebraska football because who knows what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. It's unbelievable. 196 yards rushing for Nebraska, 129 yards passing. Wisconsin with 469 total offensive yards. Nebraska 325. And I guess the bright spot is here, Kipper, Nebraska forced Wisconsin to kick 5 field goals. They missed 2 of them. So at least the scores, at least Wisconsin wasn't getting in the end zone as much as they could have been. So that is, I guess, is the bright spot. But still, man, you got to be kidding me. Just, I don't even know. Going into next week, Nebraska, Minnesota, up in Minnesota. I mean, this Minnesota team, they can't figure it out. They're absolutely terrible. Basically, is what it comes down to.
Yeah.
I don't know, Kipper. What do you see? Does Nebraska get this win? Because I don't know anymore. Because I thought Minnesota was going to be great. They're obviously not now.
I keep picking Nebraska. I don't know. Right? I don't even want to make a prediction. I think Nebraska should win the game. They're better. I know Nebraska's 2-4, but they're better than Minnesota this year. But there's no proof that they're going to win that game. There's nothing you can say the run game. Blah. No, there's nothing.
Yeah, Minnesota 4-2 right now, 1-1. So actually, they're not that bad. But I mean, it's just literally when you just sit back and you get everything off your chest and you look at what the state that Nebraska is in right now, you just are shocked because it's. You can't figure it out. You can't really pinpoint on what's going wrong. The penalties, yeah, that's an issue. The secondary not doing it right. You know, they're having problems still. It wasn't as bad yesterday, but it was still bad enough. And at the end of the day, this team just can't close it out. What'd you think of the officiating yesterday? I thought once again it was The pass interference calls were a problem.
There were some bad ones. There were some bad calls.
And that's the thing, too, is that Wisconsin wasn't really having that issue. I mean, there were a couple of times where, there were missed pass interference calls, seemingly, unfortunately, on Brandon Riley, and I feel so bad for him.
Yeah.
There was too many pass interference calls that were missed on balls thrown to him, and it was great to see Mike Riley get all bent out of shape and get an unsportsmanlike conduct.
Yeah,
that was unexpected. And then, of course, on the very next play, the official throws the flag.
Right.
It's like, well, look what happened there. And then you flip to Nebraska's secondary, and there's pass interference calls all over the place, and it was just lopsided. I mean, your thoughts, Kipper? I mean, that's another baffling thing here.
Again,
2 weeks in a row.
I'm never one to really go nuts on officiating.
Mm-hmm.
Because first of all, it is an incredibly difficult,
Absolutely.
seemingly impossible job.
Oh yeah.
I mean, has it been great? No. But again, there's other things to blame, and I just don't think the Huskers can blame their loss on the officiating. But no, it hasn't been great. Yeah. That's pretty much all I have to say. I just don't like criticizing officiating because it's impossible.
Right. Fair enough. So Nebraska, Minnesota on the road this weekend on the various media outlets, and the 2:30 kickoff, and it will be on TV, and I just have no idea what's going to happen on Saturday. I guess we'll all just find out. We'll see how the Huskers do up in Minnesota. Moving on to our next topic, and that is the latest Top 25. But first,
You're listening to The Route, a sports talk podcast. Available online at theroute.wordpress.com and on YouTube.
2 important games from the week are now under review.
but instead, we are actually going to do the AP Top 25 because we're just so eager to get that first college football playoff committee poll released that we just can't help ourselves. So we're going to critique it ourselves. Latest AP Top 25 out. And I had this discussion last week with Devin Cleach about which teams are really belong in the top 5 and which teams don't. And even the top 10 for that matter. So the latest one out, Ohio State still sitting at number 1 despite struggling against Maryland for 3 quarters. Baylor is 2, TCU is 3, Utah is 4. My Utes are number 4. Love Kyle Whittingham. And Clemson is number 5. Then LSU, Michigan State, rightfully so, drops to 7. Florida is 8. Texas A&M 9. And Alabama sits at 10. Can I just first say, Jon Kipper, usually when it comes to predicting football, whether it be the NFL or college football, you strike out more often than you make contact. I'm just letting you know about that. But I have to say, you hit a grand slam with Michigan. I distinctly remember, and I don't know if you remember this conversation. We had it on Delay of Game 1 show, and I said I cannot see Michigan doing any better than maybe 500 football this year because there was nothing at Michigan. Jim Harbaugh's coming in, new staff, new everything for the Wolverines, and they're 6-0. They just shut Northwestern.
They lost to Utah.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. 5-1, a loss to what is now a top 5 team in Utah. But other than that, the Michigan Wolverines, you saw it. Somehow you saw it. Are absolutely unbelievable. I can't believe it. I really can't.
Harbaugh's a good coach, man.
I know he is. But it's like there was nothing. There was nothing there at Michigan. There's nothing. And yet somehow Jim Harbaugh has come in and just literally did a 360 or 180, excuse me, half of the 360 for that team. Just remarkable. And I give you major props to somehow predicting that, my friend. That still baffles me.
I've always been a big Harbaugh fan. But, man, it just shows. Like, we just talked about Riley coming in and the whole talent department. Like, that's why, I mean, like that is a good coach right there. Michigan had good talent coming in, and he used it to all his advantages. Nebraska had good talent coming in, and Riley hasn't. And so, I mean, I don't want to keep going back to that, but yeah, Michigan, they're
basic differences.
Harbaugh's arguably like a top 5 coach, NFL, college, what have you, in the world. So, I mean, they got obviously a huge coup in getting him. Nebraska, they didn't have the resources or the chance to get someone like that. And that just shows, man, that's just coaching. That shows how important it is to have good coaching in college football, how imperative it is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Nebraska fans, you don't have to really tell them this because it's obvious, but man, like, you bring in someone like that with the resources of Michigan, and I mean, theoretically, Ryan, they could win out.
Yeah.
And make the playoff.
They could beat Ohio State.
Ohio State hasn't been all that impressive.
That is a home game for Michigan.
And then you have a Big Ten championship game against probably some crappy team from the West.
Probably Iowa or who knows. Probably Iowa right now at this point.
Wisconsin, Northwestern, they all have a chance still. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen because they still have a game against Michigan State. That's not going to be easy by any means. Michigan State might be better than Ohio State for all we know.
I don't know.
Well,
2 weekends in a row that Michigan State has come down to the last drive, and they've gotten lucky both times.
But I haven't been all that impressed with the Buckeyes either. But nonetheless, that's not going to be an easy.
Well, see, that's a great segue then to my question. Who is the best team out of the Big Ten? Is it Ohio State? Is it Michigan State? Is it Michigan? Or is it Iowa?
It's Iowa.
Dare we say it's the Iowa Hawkeyes?
I'd still give it to Ohio State because they have the best talent and they have the resume of last year. I mean, people don't like using last year, but they were awesome last year and returned a lot. So I still give it to them. Michigan State has looked spotty, but who knows? We'll know in a few weeks when those teams start playing.
I think it's Ohio State with JT Barrett. Now, Ohio State
think Barrett is better too.
With Cardale Jones, I don't think so. I think if we're doing the Cardale Jones route, I think Michigan might be better. Just because they're playing with nothing to lose, they're on fire. Michigan State can barely hold on anymore now.
How did Urban Meyer get those guys all to stay? What could you have possibly told?
I have no idea.
Obviously, Cardale Jones, you had to have told him you're going to play a lot. Like, you had to have told him you're probably going to start.
One of them, certainly, Braxton Miller shouldn't be there. I said that from the beginning.
The only holding those back is the transfer rule. Because you would have had to sit out a year. I mean, because if that rule didn't exist, you could have went to start at Oregon. You could have went and probably started at Nebraska. You probably could have went and started at Michigan. You probably could have went and started at Alabama.
Anywhere.
I mean, just go down the line. Anywhere. Other than like TCU, Clemson, maybe a few others. Like
Florida State.
Yeah, man. Like that's what Golson did.
Yeah. Just remarkable.
It is. And so I don't if I was Barrett, I would have probably left, but he probably used his red shirt already, I think, and so he would have legitimately lost a year.
Yeah.
I don't know if Braxton's used his red shirt. I can't remember. I don't think he has. So I think he started as a true freshman. So, but I mean, then again, you got to sit out a year. So do you want to do that?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure the pitch to Braxton was, "You're not going to be an NFL quarterback. Might as well start now. Stay with Ohio State." And be a receiver. So I don't know. But I just find it interesting how he got those guys.
So then, you still think Ohio State is the number one team over Baylor, TCU, Utah maybe?
Yeah. I just give it to them. It's theirs to lose. I would not drop them until they lose.
27 votes for Ohio State at number 1, 13 for Baylor. So, like I said, Ohio State, probably, number 1 team with JT Barrett. Cardale Jones,
And that Baylor TCU game is going to be fun.
Oh, yeah. Well, so
when is that?
Has to be upcoming.
Because I knew it was kind of in the middle of the season last year.
Oh, I have. It has to be very soon. I know that. Let me see if I can grab a schedule here for Baylor. But yeah, so is Michigan and Ohio State. That one's going to be absolutely amazing. Baylor TCU is on the day after Thanksgiving.
Oh, so they pushed it back this year. Okay, interesting.
Yeah. Very, very good.
The last game of the year for them.
Very challenging games in a row, actually, for Baylor. They host Oklahoma, they're at Oklahoma State, and then they have to play at TCU.
Yeah. We'll know if they're good. We'll know if they're a playoff team after that stretch.
Yeah. Such good stuff. Before we go, just quick predictions from Kipper before we wrap up the show. We'll forego UCLA and Stanford here. I'll pass on that. Iowa Northwestern. What do you think?
I think Northwestern's going to win that. I think, I understand they just lost 38-0. A little bit of an aberration. I think that Iowa is at some point going to fall off. I mean, they're undefeated still, but that's going to stop. I think Northwestern gets them.
Looking through here, Alabama, Texas A&M, 10 versus 9. This is a good one.
I'll say Bama.
I think so too.
Where is that?
That is at Texas A&M.
Ooh, I'll still go Bama, but I'm a little more apprehensive.
Michigan State and Michigan. I'm going with Michigan. I really don't think anybody's stopping Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines at home in front of 110,000.
I agree with you. I'll go Michigan.
And I mean, Michigan State. What? Yeah, they've won.
They've looked much more impressive.
Yeah. What has Michigan State done? You know, they can barely hold on
that
against
Oregon
Purdue and Rutgers.
Doesn't look as good as it did. Beginning of the year.
Absolutely. Michigan all the way. Florida, who talk about another team that's just absolutely blown everybody's mind with Jim McElwain now down there, and LSU 8 versus 6. What a great weekend!
It really is. That's right. I'll go LSU there. Where's that?
That is in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I'll take the Tigers.
In prime time.
I'll take the Tigers.
Yeah, I would too. Finally, just because, since Penn State is undefeated in Big Ten play, 5-1 overall, probably the worst 5-1 undefeated conference team in the country, taking on Ohio State. Got them winning or no?
I'm going to the Buckeyes here.
Yeah.
If I say I think they're the best team in the country, I can't have them losing to Penn State, though.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. NFL, really quickly here. Obviously, we have yet to get through this day in the NFL. I know Kipper is eagerly watching his Packers right now. To go through the schedule here, there's not really a lot of interesting games. Panthers-Seahawks, how about that? Panthers undefeated coming into today.
You got to tell me where these are at.
This is in Seattle.
Yeah, I will ride Seattle there.
How about the Chargers against your Packers? Green Bay.
I will be attending this game, actually.
Oh, very nice.
I will be in Lambeau next week. Yes, Packers. Nice. I don't think the Chargers are that good.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, fair enough. How about a laughing game? Two surprisingly very terrible teams, the Ravens and the 49ers in San Francisco.
I still think the Ravens are better. I think the Niners could be the worst team in the league.
Oh, yeah. I said that from the beginning. Once they hired Tom Sula.
Yikes.
That's
been a dumpster fire.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Patriots-Colts in Indianapolis.
Oh, Patriots. They're going to... I mean, I don't know if you could get the over-under higher. You have a pissed-off Tom Brady in New England. All the stuff that happened last year. Mm-hmm. I mean, a bad Colts secondary. Yeah, Patriots are going to smoke them, Ryan.
I would agree. I think this is probably
let's just say
year.
Indy needs luck.
Yeah, exactly. This is probably the year that the Patriots might go undefeated. And
I've been hearing that. I listen to Bill Simmons a lot.
Yeah,
He's talking like that.
What do you think?
No, I don't think. This is not as good of a team as when they went undefeated. I think this is like a 14-2 team.
But the NFL did kind of basically insult Tom Brady, and he is, as you just said, he's rip-roaring hot.
Patriots will not go undefeated.
Oh, all right.
I am very confident in that, actually.
All right. Fair enough. You heard it here. That's Jon Kipper. Joining me today on a abbreviated version of The Route. We got some predictions in Facebook.com/TheRoute2 at @the_Route2 on Twitter, and our WordPress page, theroute2.wordpress.com. We'll have this podcast uploaded, and hopefully next week we'll have Devin and we'll have Brent back. Poor Brent Bonfleur can't catch a break. I hope he gets better. Kipper, that was fun, buddy. It always is.
I had a good time, Ryan. You'll be on my show next week.
Yes, sir. Jon Kipper is the host of The Kip Show on Friday afternoons from 4 to 6 Central on 90.3 KRNU in Lincoln, or online at krnu.unl.edu. I'll be guest appearing on his show on Friday.
Talking some baseball.
Oh, yes. Go Cubs, go! All the way. Hoping for a win. Got it. I really need it. The Huskers, I can't rely on wins from them anymore.
I understand completely.
Thanks, Kipper.
Yes, sir.
We'll see you next week, everybody.